Hello and welcome, family. This is Kevin Orris. Another interview in the Primal Polarity series. I'm interviewing a lot of amazing folks on masculine, feminine dynamics, mindset, subconscious blocks, and how to overcome them. And today I'm bringing in an amazing brother for y'all, Pure Jaguar, who's here now. If you're tuning in right now, let us know where you are in the world, one thing you're grateful for. If you have any questions while we're chatting, please toss him in there. There he is. What's good, brother?
Brother, how you doing?
Really good, man. How are you today?
Not too bad. I've been a bit fluey the last couple of days, so I'm a little bit run down on energy, so a little bit tired, but yeah, just getting comfortable to settle in for our live, man.
Right on, man. Well, I'm really grateful to have you here, and yeah, I've been following your work for a while, and I think your writing style and also, the work I know you are doing. I've been reading a lot about the work you do for clients and as a holistic therapist, as a metaphysician, and I think you're very eclectic because you go into some of the more esoteric topics, but also very like grounded and real and human. And I would love for you to, just briefly introduce yourself for the folks joining. Like, what are you about?
Yeah, cool. So I'm all about, breaking free of the limitations that are set within us, right? So there's the unconscious, the subconscious, and the conscious mind. And I believe that once you get the mind in check, there's a release that will happen that will heal the body. And so what this really is about for us is to really transcend the limitations of the ego and start to live more from a soul-based perspective. And so the soul experience is more like love and joy and acceptance and freedom. And so I try to get people, well, I don't try, I do, I get them to that place. And I think it's all around like, balancing out duality. So there's masculine and feminine, positive, negative, all that kind of stuff. And so I work with the ego and the soul. And so I can be a little bit controversial sometimes because I speak to things that a lot of people aren't comfortable speaking to, that's going on in society and the world at large and things like that. So my nickname's been like the emotional pit bull, which is like I can be, super direct and just be like, bam, and hit this point of truth. But it's always done from a really good place, which is the intent to help. So I was in the investment world for a long time, and my nickname in Sydney, Australia was the Wolf of Wall Street guy. That was,
Nice.
people can let their imagination run wild with that. And I kind of went through a dissolution of identity, which a lot of people look to plant medicines and, sort of supernatural experiences to go there. I've done all that as well. But I found that like once I really started to understand the nature of the mind and language, that was my real catalyst for making profound change. And that's the area that I specialize in, is language, which flows through my writing. I actually speak, I think, a lot better than I do write. But they're kind of same medium, same sort of outcome, but different mediums with which I express myself. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell at the moment with what I'm doing.
Right on. Beautifully said. And definitely think you speak as well as you write. That's what first drew me to you is I think someone was sharing some of your posts and your writing was like super clear, cutting through the bullshit. And I just took note. I was like, this guy. So I'm curious, coming from the investment world, I know you were part of multiple companies and we're living that, Wolf of Wall Street lifestyle. What was that moment for you, the turning point in your hero's journey from ego to soul? Like, was it a complete dissolution, abyss experience, or what happened there?
It was really interesting. I was on my way to buy these marble cubes that I'd had made as bedside tables, and they were like $8,000 each or something like that. And I had a $3 million apartment in a place called Darling Point in Sydney, which is like per square meterage, it was the most expensive place in Australia at the time to live, with like an average 2-bedroom apartment being $5.2 million. So I had it all decked out. I had the bachelor pad, I had the expensive cars, the gold Rolexes, I had it all. And I was driving out to pick up these marble cubes. And one of my closest friends turned to me, she said, "You're really unhappy, aren't you?" And I said, "I'm desperately miserable." And it was just that. It was just really simple, and a lot of my experiences in life have been pretty intense. And so we think we need to go through this intense stuff. I've done martial arts, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, my whole body's tattooed. I spent time in jail, all this stuff where I think it's got to be these catalytic like just crazy moments. And it was just that simple. It was life just went, this is what's going on for you, mate. So pay attention. And so from that moment on, I just decided to go in and have a look at what is it that I want to be doing? Because I was trying to fill the void up with, you know, Mercedes and like Lamborghinis and all this shit. And it just didn't do anything. And so it was just in that moment that I made the decision to move forward and figure out what it is I was supposed to be doing.
Right. That's beautiful. That's a really nice distinction. It's not like some huge epiphany crisis, but it's like a subtle moment of radical honesty with self.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think like most of our big moments need to be defined as something that's huge. And sometimes it can be something so simple and gentle like that, where it's just a little tap on the shoulder. And I've been through enough big stuff, and I would say that I was probably in a crisis already when I was doing it. But life didn't need to deliver me this Mack truck to the side of the head before I'd wake up. I was kind of already there.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people will resonate with that if they are, you know, living out a life or a relationship, a career that is actually making them unhappy. And
Yeah.
it can be as simple as acknowledging that and then taking the steps to shift. And for you, what was like the first catalyst after that to get you into the work now? Because I know you're seeing clients and helping a lot of people.
Yeah, so I was in New Zealand. I moved out of Sydney to New Zealand, and I was like, I've just got to heal my body from the drugs and the alcohol and the people that I was around. You know, was you can't heal in the same environment that makes you sick. You know, I think Hippocrates said that. I can't remember. It was one of the Stoics, and I was over there, and you know, I was drinking really clean water from the ground and just eating really healthy food, you know, in the mountains, right? Like complete opposite, like hectic party boy in Sydney to the mountains in New Zealand where I wasn't drinking, I wasn't doing anything. And I woke up one day and I'd chosen 5 subjects to look at for what I wanted to pursue. So it was like naturopathy, motorcycles, jiu-jitsu, music, and tattooing. And so I was more drawn towards tattooing. And so I used the process of elimination, which really forms the foundation of my work now. I look at what people are operating from the I'm not rather the I am. So I use the process of elimination. We remove what we're not to reveal what's already there. And so I started to do that. And then I woke up one morning and I just started to write lists out, which were, you know, what do I spend most of my time researching? What am I naturally good at? You know, what do people compliment me for? What do people ask me about? And I looked at all these lists and I just went, oh, I'm meant to be a therapist. And it was just that. And so then I moved back to Sydney a month later and I studied for 6 months and I went and did a Bachelor of Integrative Psychotherapy. But before I even knew that, there was like a connection. There's a voice that comes to me when I've got to make big decisions. It kind of appears up on the right-hand quadrant of my awareness. And I'd had this voice sitting on the end of the bed and I said, it said to me, or I said to myself, whatever, you're here to heal sexual trauma. And I was like, okay. And that's never happened to me. I hadn't really been exposed to that on any level. And so I went and did a Bachelor of Integrative Psychotherapy for 6 months. And I was just like, this isn't deep enough. This isn't the right work for me. It's too basic. If I'm going to be a therapist, I have to be doing something that is top level, like healing people quickly, moving through it, not operating from a place of working with someone for 15 years and maybe one day they'll get something from me. I just made that dedication. And then so I left that, I went it alone, and my 3rd client was a sexual trauma victim, and then I've worked with more than 1,500 of them since then. So that's how I got guided into that area.
Wow, that's amazing. So this is a good pivot point because why is there so much sexual trauma, A, and B, masculine and feminine dynamics? Why is it after, you know, our species has gotten this far, obviously men and women have been doing the thing for so long, why, especially now with the culture wars and a lot of the confusion, I see this in my work a lot, where, you know, folks are stuck, either they're divorced and they found that their marriage didn't work and how they learn to relate just isn't working at all, or they're younger and maybe even in the conscious community and they're not finding, you know, some of their deepest intimate needs being met. And I think a lot of this has to do with understanding the core principles of masculine and feminine dynamics. I'm curious your take on this.
Yeah, so I mean, the way that I've seen it is it really comes down to a sense of power versus powerlessness. This is where sexual trauma really largely operates from. So there's deep programming in the subconscious, and it's based in a lack of something or a limitation towards something. And with every single person I've worked with around sexual trauma, it's powerlessness. And so if it's I'm not powerful will be the negated program in the subconscious. How that's going to manifest, and this will manifest through masculine and feminine, that will be more around the victim and the perpetrator, or subservience and dominance. This is what we see play out. So these are very low level energetic subconscious frequencies that are emitted. So you'll see that, let's say, a female that might have been unfortunately had some act committed against her when she was a little girl, like 5, 7, 8, whatever. What will happen is she will see the man as a position of authority. And so the authority, what will happen, will come later in life as a sense of dominance towards her. So she might be subservient towards the dominance, right? It's two sides of the same coin. They just play out differently, like they switch. One's an aversion to something, one's an attraction to something. So typically, the feminine will be more of this, the subservient one. And we could see this in that world as like submission, maybe. This is why when we see, especially in a sort of a new masculine feminine place where, you know, a masculine man wants a submissive woman, and a lot of that is taken as like sexual subservience to them. But it's not really the same thing. I use the word surrender because surrender actually from the root French Anglo word means to give over willingly, right? I had a woman sort of challenge me on it. She's like, this means to surrender in battle, to admit defeat. I'm like, not at the root word, it doesn't. Like, and I use the example of mediocre. Like, Kevin, what do you think of mediocre when I say the term mediocre? What definition?
I mean, the first impulse is like average, right? Or just
Yeah, and that's what it's used for, right? But mediocre broken down means meaty, which is middle, and ochre, which is a tree. So it's to plant a tree halfway up a hill. That's what it means. So when we're like, this is where we have to be really mindful of the language that we use, because surrender is actually a beautiful offering, but it's been translated into admit defeat, and that's not the root word of it. So from a vibrational physics perspective, the root word, the etymological one, which is a spelling, that's why they call it that, that's going to be the vibrational construct with which attracts in the manifestation that the word needs, or the word means, sorry. Now, when we're in the deepest recesses of the subconscious, so we're going to look at a sense of scarcity and limitation. The program's going to be I'm not powerful. Then we're going to move up a little bit higher into the conscious mind, which are the thoughts that are going to come with it, which for a woman might be, I'm scared of him. He's intimidating. You know, he has power over me. He's the authority. That's my boss. And so the feelings are going to be maybe like tension, anxiety, worry, concern, anger, hatred, projection, things like that towards men. This is largely what's been preyed on in the feminist movement towards women that are programmed around this. And then the behaviors which come at the sort of at the end of the chain are going to be like subservience, but the vibrational construct is going to attract men in that are dominant to the subservience, because in the subconscious they've got the idea of being subservient. So it'll go both ways with this program. But this is the really important thing to look at. So sexual trauma is all around powerlessness and the victim and the perpetrator construct. So if it doesn't play out in subservience and dominance, it'll play out in the victim perpetrator construct. And so then that way, if it's the victim construct, a woman unfortunately might have a boss that's really creepy or sleazy, or, you know, look at her like an object or something like that. And that'll be the perpetrator. Now, where it gets interesting, if the woman, and I'm just using this as an example, so I'm not saying it's exclusive to women. I've worked with men that have gone through it as well. If the woman doesn't have a perpetrator externally, she'll become a perpetrator to her own victim through destructive behavior towards herself. So this is what I've really broken down in the nature of sexual trauma. And there's also a safety aspect as well, which it'll take too long for me to go into on this one, but powerlessness, that generates anxiety and the worry, the concern, the subservience and the dominance, and the victim and the perpetrator construct around that.
Yeah, beautifully broken down. What I'm curious about is the other side, because I've noticed a lot of men fearing, you know, what's been named the dark masculine, or that dominant kind of taking energy. And I'm curious, like, if you've experienced that, and what's like on the other side of that dynamic with like a potentially a good man, right? He has good intentions and is in his heart, but he's unable to access more of that dominant energy for fear of traumatizing.
Yeah, so I look at like the dark masculine or dark feminine or toxic, whatever, as just immature. That's the way I see it. It's just immature feminine or immature masculine. So the immature masculine, and I did a post with this. I said a man leads, a boy controls. A woman surrenders, a girl manipulates. So control and manipulation are fairly similar, but control is usually more of an outward aspect based on fear. Manipulation is a pretending to hide away because the fear is underneath it as well. So when we look at a man, what he needs to do, and this is in the book written by Douglas Gillette, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, a boy needs to separate from his mother and individuate from the gender in a gender opposite way to the mother. So they need to become separate. So we see almost universally, a lot of these men, which are boys, will have wounding around the mother. So it'll either be they've been mummy's boys. They're typically, it's funny because you think like a mummy's boy would have a good attitude towards women, and they don't most of the time. Like I was in a barber shop in Sydney and I heard these two sort of gym bros. They were pretty jacked up and they were talking loud in the shop and whatever. And one of them said to the other one, they were like, "Oh, you got any sluts on the go like that?" And the other guy was like, "Oh no, oh, yeah, plenty, but I've got a porn star I'm meeting up with in LA." And they're talking really loud so everyone could hear it. And I was almost about to ask them and say, "Do you guys love your mother?" And they're the typical sort of one that will have like son of an angel or love my mother or fucking whatever bullshit tattoos on them, right? That's the sort of
Right.
caliber that they were. And they would say, "Oh, I love my mother more than anything." It's like, well, your mother's a woman. So you're categorizing every woman as some sort of slut, object, whatever, but you've got a good relationship with your mother and you say, "Oh, you know, I love my mother so much." So you can't have one without the other. Do you know what I mean? And so
Mhm.
that's the real immature boy mentality, that women are objects versus their mother being this angel, so to speak. But if you're treating women like that, subconsciously you're treating your mother like that in the same way. And so the mummy's boy mentality or the mother's boy, where they haven't separated or individuated from her, what will happen is that dark masculine that seeks to control is going to find a woman to bring in so then he can be mothered again. And then when he doesn't get his way, he's going to throw his toys out of the pram and he's going to be needy, erratic, unstable, controlling. He'll be manipulative as well and try to control her under the guise of, "I'm trying to protect you or lead you." And so that's the way that I see that. It's just immature masculine. And we can label it as dark if we want, but dark is just shadow. We just got to bring it into the light. That's all we really have to do with it.
Yeah, I love that book and the really the loss of rites of passage and these rituals of initiation,
Yeah.
specifically for men, is I think a lot of what spurred the toxic masculinity kind of, you know, the media hype around it, which much of it is very real.
Mm.
Unfortunately, a lot of men are swept up in that because, you know, the mind fuck, and I experienced this myself, is men associate what you just described with those guys in the barbershop as power. They think that is actually a path to masculine power when it's
Mm.
actually a complete inversion. And I think a
Yep.
lot of women are, you know, waking up to this, and you know, certainly the intersexual dynamics are rapidly evolving, you know, in modern day with dating apps and the digital culture combined with, you know, the awakening to the fact that a lot of folks are, you know, adult bodies, but they're boys and girls inside, right?
Yeah, her children, you know, I look at I'm not a fan of sleeping around in the dating app world and stuff like that. I think we live in a society where it's all too convenient and easy to get rid of people and replace them with someone else. And so when I work with someone that's on dating apps, I'm like, you're going to be learning a lot of lessons in the classroom of kindergarten. That's what I call it, kindergarten, because it's like
Brilliant.
a lot of children running around. That are really like projecting their own internal wounds onto the other person. And it's really out there, you know, it's like, I mean, I don't even check women out when I'm in the street with them. Like, I don't do that. I honor my partner that I've been with now for almost 2 years, you know, and I just don't live in that energy. I just did a voice message to a guy this morning that he's like, "I'm doing my no fat, no porn thing." I said, firstly, get rid of that term, the no fat thing, right? Like, words are so powerful. Say to yourself that I'm retaining because I'm honoring my life force. You know, even little things like that are so important because the media would have us think that men are toxic just by virtue of being a man. And
Right.
so you look at Homer Simpson, Peter Griffin in cartoons, leads in, you know, movies with men. They're sort of these bumbling idiots that can't get by. You look at the movies in the 80s like Predator and Rambo and Rocky, it's like Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Those guys were like muscled up alphas. And now it's about being sort of delicate and soft, and there's a place for that, you know, like you can have a soft heart, but you want to have a strong body and a strong mind, you know, and that's where I sort of see the attack on masculinity has really led us to, is these needy, erratic, unstable boys, because they're raised by single mothers, and the single mothers are doing an amazing job. But the absent fathers are creating a lack of strong male role models. And sometimes we need to have a strong hand in that as men and say, nah, like, get your shit together. You know, I was working with a man just the other day, and I said, I'm going to say something man to man to you. He goes, yeah. I said, get your fucking shit together, you know? And he was like, whoa. And I was like, get your fucking shit together. You got daughters. You have fucking daughters. Get your shit together. Stop acting like this, you know? And so that's the way that I'll talk to men a lot of the time if I see that that's required, where it needs that sort of strong hand to say, what the fuck are you doing? Sort it out, you know? And it's not about manning up and saying it to a boy. It's about saying, get your shit together. You're a man that has responsibilities. Act accordingly.
Yes. And unfortunately, in the boy psychology, you know, responsibility equals like being entrapped or ensnared, when actually,
Yep.
you know, a sign of maturity is the more responsibility you take on, the more influence, power, and integration, if you accept it and move within it. And this is the whole idea of discipline is freedom. I know this has played out in my life, and I see a lot of men that are joining the men's movement right now, you know, joining men's circles, are actually like taking a step in this direction, which is amazing news. That's one of the big struggles I've noticed. I just did an event in Berlin. A lot of the men of Europe, this was like a number one, you know, challenge. A lot of these guys, like you said, they have children already. They're already patriarchs in some way. They have families, they're holding jobs, and yet internally they're still feeling trapped or like they're not free, right?
Yeah.
And like what's some of the dynamics there that you see? Like what would you tell a man right now who's listening to this and he's like, oh fuck, I need to get my shit together?
Yeah, so it was interesting because when you said taking responsibility, right? The opposite of taking responsibility is blaming. A victim blames, right? When a victim will blame someone to justify their own anger, and we see this with men, and this is where the imbalance comes from. You know, we see sacred rage, like this term being brought up a lot. I've seen that sort of new in the lexicon of the healing space, and I see a lot of this like sacred rage and fierce compassion and loving fiercely to the point of sacrifice. I'm sort of like, there's these catch-all terms which I'm not a big fan of, right? And so what I say to that is take responsibility. Like, where are you not taking responsibility? Where are you blaming? Where are you placing fault on someone else? Start looking at yourself, because, you know, like, you're the common theme in your life. Wherever you've got problems, you are always there. You're the common theme, right? You can blame life, blame the world, and remain powerless. But when a man doesn't take responsibility, he's in the energy of blame. And blame is used to justify his own anger because there'll be shame underneath it. Shame will generate the feeling of humiliation, and the response is to want to isolate, shut down. And what will happen is, in the masculine feminine world, shame will be dealt with in different ways. Men will attack and defend it. Women will suppress and deny it. Now, when this happens, like, this is why men fight when they go to pubs, because they'll drink beer, their estrogen goes through the roof. So it makes them aggressive and makes them angry. They don't want to back down from a fight due to public shame and humiliation. And then they get into a destructive need to do something that is on the attack and defend spectrum. So what we do with that is, like, where are we not taking responsibility, and start taking responsibility. You know, I heard John Wineland say this a while ago, and I was already saying this just in a different way. He said, what he says to men when they first come to him, and I say the same thing. They go, what does it take for me to be a man? I go, make a fucking living. Make a living. Because if you can't commit to yourself just to make your life a little bit better, you can't commit to a child, you can't commit to a woman, you can't provide, you can't do any of that. You can try, and you can maybe want the woman to lower her standards to meet your lack of commitment. So responsibility and commitment are kind of synonymous. You can't have one without the other. You know, you can't be committed but not be responsible. But a lot of men these days want the easy way around. But one of the things they have to do is be responsible for themselves, and face your own shit. You know, to sort your shit out, you got to face your own shit. We're not hunters, we're not warriors anymore, we're none of that. So the hardest task a man can take on is to face his own ego demons and to go and hunt those. And that's really what I do with them, is I help them to see what they can't see. Because the ego is just the inner child. It's not about killing the ego. The thing that wants to kill the ego is the ego. That's why it never really works. But it's about an ego integration, where I was having a conversation with my partner and she asked me what I think the ego was. And we have the same opinion on it, which is it's about allowing it to come up, but not reacting to it anymore, not acting on it anymore. And a lot of men will be trapped in their ego, which is why they won't take responsibility. To sort of come full circle, the ego doesn't want to be responsible for its own messiness, its own darkness. It wants to make the world responsible for it because it wants to be right about the fact that its own limitation is accurate in the form that it's not enough or it's less than or something like that.
Right. And man, we saw this play out on a world stage, you know, during 2020 when a lot of folks, you know, maybe they had it all together, but when the whole Corona thing started, the blame, shame, guilt projections just started flying, right? It was like a, you know, Mexican shootout. And I think a lot of people got sucked into the work for the first time because of the overwhelm or the, you know, disillusionment. And I'm sure you noticed this in your work and certainly in Australia. A lot of folks got pushed on the cliff. And, you know, going deeply into this idea of taking responsibility for your life, what if, like, in your circles, right, in the healing community or even beyond, what have you seen as like the major trend since Corona? Like, have you seen a shift in the space? I've certainly in the States, I've been tracking things, and I'm curious what you're tracking.
Yeah, look, it depends how dark and deep we want to get with this, you know, down the rabbit hole, which I think we're on the same page anyway. But I saw a great revelation. It was revealing how the world's been run, and there's been a split in it. Like there's the aversion to, right? Aversion and attraction. And most people are in an avoidant energy. And so what I see with it is people are actually waking up to how they've been living and the misery that's been there, like the 9 to 5, you know, I think the Fight Club, he goes, the things you own end up owning you, and you have to lose everything before you can do anything. And I really feel that that speaks to the last couple of years around it. People are finding their own sovereignty. People are going, something doesn't feel right about this, and they're starting to go internal. We've been playing the game of external circumstance, comfort, and management instead of our own process, which is the real game, which is internal evolution. I just constantly play the game of inner evolution. I don't care about what happens outside. If I shift inside, the external is going to support that. And so we're seeing a lot of that stuff really come through, that people are going, I need to take responsibility for my stuff. I don't want to be subject to, you know, you said being pushed to the edge of the cliff. Life is very fragile. And it's like, we even look now, you know, like if heavy rain comes through, and where I live in Byron Bay, there were floods, and I was in one of the worst affected suburbs. And people will run home to take their washing in because it's on the line. I'm like, we used to sleep in this stuff. You know, there's this it's shown the people that are resilient and adaptable and can survive and move through things. But it also revealed a lot of virtue signaling as well, where people just take on some sort of cause to feel better about themselves without having to do anything to actually earn the place to be able to say that. You know what I mean? And so Jordan Peterson talks to this as well, that in this modern sort of woke agenda, they can just pick up something and then it's virtue signaling and that's it, without having to go through anything difficult, which is kind of like a disservice to the people that actually go through really rough stuff to better themselves. Like, and I know that we face our stuff like head on, we look straight at it. We don't just pick up the next common thing and go, cool, you know, I'm this now, or I'm that, or, you know, support Ukraine, or monkeypox vaxxers, whatever, you know what I mean? It's like, it's become pretty ridiculous. So there's like the super offended, and then there's the super resilient, which have really been born out of this quote unquote pandemic.
Yeah, beautifully said. From ground zero too, I know. I mean, the States was crazy, but watching Australia and Canada, I think a lot of the Western world is like, what the fuck is going on? It's like, oh yeah. This has been going on the whole time. It's just now you're seeing a little more of the cards. The hands are being shown now at the table. So I love what you said there. And something you picked up on earlier, which I'm a nerd for as well, is etymology and spell casting. And I'm curious to take that a little deeper with you, because, you know, with clients and subconscious programming, obviously this is like a master key. But what if, like, for someone who's like not really wise to this, what is your kind of mental model or, framework with that, especially around like the root meaning of words? And like you mentioned earlier with that man, re-languaging things to actually
Hmm.
retake a center of power.
So it's really like what I look at the term of truth versus like falsehood around it. So I'll get you to do this, right? Like I want you to feel the weight of this statement when I say and repeat back to me, I'm not going to judge anyone anymore.
I'm not going to judge anyone anymore.
So just feel that, right? Now I want you to say back to me, I love and accept all beings just as they are.
I love and accept all beings just as they are.
Feel the difference in the weight of that. Now, this is the world of physics, right? So once we start to understand that, the first statement was in a form of negation. I'm not going to do something. So don't think about a red car. Don't think about a yellow balloon. Don't think about a penguin. If I'm not going to judge someone, I'm actually saying I'm in resistance to what's happening. So I'm not going to judge someone. It actually says in the subconscious, I'm going to judge someone. Yeah. And so when I hear the statements, I had a woman come to me that had Lyme's disease. She had it for 10 or 12 years or something like that. And I said, how do you walk around talking to yourself? And it took a bit of unpacking to get there, but the general statement was, I'm not 100%. Now, at the time, she may not have felt great, but that at the time was generating the feelings of heaviness, depression, some of the lethargy that she would feel. If you're walking around saying, I'm not 100% all the time, guess what? You're going to experience that. So what I got her to say instead was, my current state is of optimal vitality. Now, even in that statement, that's a truth, even if she doesn't feel good, but it's a much lighter statement. Within around 3 to 4 months, her symptoms had started to dissipate by 80%. We did some other stuff and some shifting of the language as well. But what we have to be really careful of in the language is the way that we speak. Even someone that claims they're an empath, right? What I say to empaths, I'm like, you're not an empath, you're just traumatized, right? And we see that term thrown around everywhere because you've got a highly attuned nervous system to threat. So you pick up on things, you're more attuned to, which can be beautifully used. But when we're bypassing that and say, oh, I'm an empath, love and light and all that sort of stuff, that's where it's a disservice. And then people typically in that will start to say, oh, I feel bad for someone. I feel bad for this. I feel bad for that. Take out whatever you're projecting that onto, and all you're saying is, I feel bad, I feel bad, I feel bad, I feel bad. So someone just mentioned, so shifting the positive language, not necessarily, because the positive language is a reaction to negative language. It has to be the truth of the statement. So her body saying and her saying that my current state is one of optimal vitality, even if she doesn't feel good, she will be telling the truth to her body, and the body will respond that way rather than saying, I'm perfectly healed. If you're sick, that's not the truth. But if we look at it from the metaphor of, and this is autoimmune issues, right, that I work with a lot. Autoimmune issues are not the body attacking itself. It's not. The body doesn't attack itself. Not without cause from a psychological perspective. So every time I work with someone that's got an autoimmune issue, we look at the nature of the way they talk to themselves and they're attacking themselves. So I look at it from a metaphorical aspect, right? So the body's 90% water. We look at the ocean. If we see a really violent and aggressive storm coming in over the ocean that's chaotic, that's violent, that's turbulent, what happens to the water?
It's completely churned up, massive waves
Yeah.
scattered.
It will be directly correlated in its manifestation based on the energy that the storm projects. So it'll get chaotic, violent, and turbulent. Now, if you're telling yourself that you hate yourself all the time, right? Hate is an anagram for heat, right? If I've got hatred, which hatred is actually the hottest emotion, rage is underneath that, anger underneath that, what it's going to generate is a lot of heat in the system. So when we feel that there's something wrong with us, that leads to an internal state of conflict. Conflict leads to resistance. Resistance generates friction. Friction produces a massive amount of heat in the body. Heat is an anagram for hate. So if I'm in a state of self-loathing and self-hatred, that's the hottest emotion. That heat is going to try to leave the body. And when we're in that space over time that starts to accumulate over 10 or 20 years, it can't help but start to attack itself because you're psychologically attacking yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that anagram piece too. That's one of those like ninja moves in language. And
Yeah, well, inflammation, right? Inflammation is inflamed, which means on fire, which means too much heat.
mm,
That's another one of the words we have to look at. We really start to break it down, right? It's so obvious when we see it. And then we look at the body parts as well, like the hands are for holding on. Arthritis, which is an autoimmune issue, which is an inflammatory response. The hottest emotion we experience is hatred and rage and anger. So when someone comes to me and they say, oh, I've got arthritis in my left hand, as you would know, Kevin, left is feminine, right is masculine. The left hand, I'm like, okay, cool, you got arthritis in there. It forms in the joints. Where do we join in life, but in relationships? So I'll be like, okay, well, which woman do you hate? Or which woman are you angry at? And they're like, what? How did you know that? And so the hands are for holding on to things. The elbow is an example. Like, this is how obvious it is. Once you see the codes, it's really obvious,
well, this is
right?
like the doctrine of correspondence, right, in alchemy. Like
Yeah,
the
correct.
air, yeah.
Right. And so if we're looking at like an elbow, the elbow goes 90 degrees. It's like a door. So a door goes one way, right? And it's a hinge joint. So a door sits on a hinge. So what's the elbow for? It's for support. We lean on it. So when it goes one way, which the elbow goes away from the body as its first movement, it'll always be someone that has been given too much support towards their parents when they have elbow problems. So left, again, is, the feminine, right is the masculine. So we start to look at the body, right, from that aspect. Then we look at the emotions that are associated with it, and we start to link up the patterns, and then we can get there. But the main thing is, it's all in language. Now, Carl Jung spoke about, the collective unconscious and king, warrior, magician, lover, which are archetypes. There are feminine archetypes as well. But those archetypes don't mean anything unless you have words to label them. So if we're looking at something that we don't understand, it doesn't mean anything. So king has a meaning to us, but only because we attribute the word king, because the king has a meaning and a stigma associated with it. So when I really figured it out that that language was the root in all of it, and I mean, this is in the Bible, it's in the beginning, there was the word. The word is a vibration, right? Word extends out to create a language. Language creates codes and codes create programs. And that's how we operate in the mind. And it's all based in language.
Yes, I mean this is one of the mind fucks, and you're preaching to the choir here. I love this stuff. The mind fuck is that reality, or the Vedas talk about this, about the Akashic field, or like now we see it called the quantum field, and language is the code.
Yep.
So what's really wild is that, and it's also been used to control, right? And the woke mafia and this whole, Jordan Peterson, bless his heart, was kind of first one through the wall that has gotten the most bloody on this topic. Compelled language and shifting definitions is actually a control tactic, because it's changing code across culture, and therefore changing the subconscious of like entire countries, right? Entire nations. And this is what's really kind of, to me, the underlying, like, I know you're deep in the rabbit holes, but kind of the scary part about watching the world right now, it's like, oh, wow, language is being rewritten. And this is a bid for power, right?
Yeah, totally. And it can be used completely to manipulate. Language can be very powerful. When I was in the investment world, I wanted to become a good salesman. So then I went into that world of understanding language. And so what I saw in it was language can be used to manipulate, or it can be used to heal. But it's a vibration underneath it. So it's a frequency. So when we're in these subconscious programs, and I don't think I've ever spoken about this in sort of a public forum before. It's all in my one-on-one. But there's the observer effect, right? The observer effect is with the intention with what we view something, there's an expectation we place on that which we expect to see. Now, when they were firing, these scientists, it's called the double slit experiment, they were firing photons down cannons to, a photon is a light particle for those that don't know. And what would happen is when they were observing it, the photons would exist as a photon. When they weren't observing it, it would uncollapse into a wave function, which is the fifth dimension. Then they'd observe it again, it would collapse into a three-dimensional particle, right, which is a photon. Now, based on the observer effect, the intention, they were expecting to see the photon. Wave, fifth dimension, particle, three dimension, yeah? So when we're governed and guided by the subconscious programming, what will happen is the frequency that we emit, which is I'm not enough, that we can't see, is going to match the frequency in the fifth dimension and then collapse into form. And so when we dissolve these programs in the subconscious through language, the frequency is released of I'm not enough. It uncollapses in back into the fifth dimension. Someone else picks up on that frequency. You release that energy. You then start to be able to emit a higher frequency of energy. And so you will then be able to collapse the fifth dimensional wave function into a more higher grade quality three-dimensional particle, which you call your existence. So, yeah, that's kind of
this is the
yeah,
deep stuff, right? And this is actually,
yeah,
I mean, what you're describing is an elegant way using that experiment to describe what metaphysics is.
yeah,
Which, you know, when the, you know, Hermes Trismegistus and all these folks are saying all is mind, that's how it
yeah,
happens, right? And
yeah,
what I was kind of hearing when you were expressing, like the way I feel it is that clairsentience or emotion, and it's like in the body. So it actually
yeah,
translates to a sensation. Like this is what people, when I get goosebumps, you know, that's one of the ways I think people commonly experience it. But thoughts really are things. And this also gets into
yeah.
thought forms and how to, you know, basically pull down higher grade code into your reality.
Yeah, totally. Thoughts from a physics perspective are up to 20 times stronger than feeling. So this is why, like, when I talk about this, they're more in like the lighter realms, you know. I think it was Mozart said it the best when he was asked about his music. He goes, I didn't write the music, I just heard it before anyone else, right? So thought forms are there. That's the fifth dimension that collapses into a particle. So it's like when I work with someone, say, that's heartbroken. I'm like, do you ever wonder why when you're not thinking about them, you're not heartbroken? So this shows the power of thoughts, right? If we're not thinking about something, the feeling doesn't show up. Now, we might get triggered by something, and there's a whole system with that that needs to be looked at. But the feeling will usually follow the thought at the subconscious level. And when it's triggered, then the energy goes up into the head and it starts spinning around through the fibers that carry it, which are called the afferent fibers, right? So there's efferent fibers and afferent fibers. But and there's a lot of somatic work out there, but until we shift the power of the mind, then what's going to happen is it's just going to keep showing up in different forms. Because when we're guided by these programs, which is I'm not something, so I'm not enough, the ego, because it wants to maintain its survival, is going to go to look to confirm that out in the world. So when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If I'm not enough, I can see 1,000 instances that I am enough, but I'm going to look to confirm that I'm not enough because the ego wants to be right about its own limitation and lack, because it wants to maintain its existence. And so, like I said, that frequency is going to be emitted in the subconscious. It's going to match up with the frequency in the fifth dimension and collapse back into particle in the form. And so it'll just keep doing that until we make the unconscious conscious, which is Carl Jung. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct your life, and we'll call it fate. And as the great alchemist called it, unio mentalis, which is the unified mind. So there's like the unconscious, which is the soul, subconscious, which is like the ego, and the conscious mind, and which is like thoughts and things like that we go about each day. The subconscious is kind of like a bridge between the unconscious and the conscious, and we're meant to collapse that bridge. That's where we find peace. Michael Singer talks about this, I think, in his book, The Surrender Experiment, where once we collapse the bridge, the thoughts stop showing up. And I think it was Yogananda, whatever his name is, I can't remember it is. He did autobiography as a yogi, of a yogi. He talks about this as well. Once we make the subconscious dissolve, which is by seeing these programs, then we have what the alchemists called solve et coagula, which is dissolution through coagulation, which is to join. So we join the shadow or the dark parts of the mind, or the unconscious and subconscious, with the conscious mind, and then we become unified and we become whole. And that's the wholeness that we're really searching for.
Mm. So many bookmarks in this one, and nobody freak out. This will be saved and posted so you can refer back to it. Getting a clinic right now in metaphysics. Brother, what's like, to give us a practice or a ritual, something that has helped you and maybe you use with clients, like a sneak peek into this kind of work? Because everyone knows about law of attraction, affirmations, visualization, but a lot of that stuff doesn't work for people, right? They do it, they practice it, they do the thing. And can you break that down a little bit and maybe share what you do?
Well, it's cool because, and that's a good question. It's what it all is it's just physics, right? I look at law of attraction, it's just physics. Manifestation is physics. So when we're in this energy of trying to attract something, we usually want to attract something because we're under the impression we don't have it. So we're in a state of scarcity, which is one of the psychological time-based containers that I work in. And so that's a sense of limitation. So I'm going to want money because I don't have it. I want a relationship because I'm lonely. I want to get healthy because I don't feel healthy. So all it does is it's a reactive nature to get something, to get away from the thing that got us into the position in the first place. So we have desire, right? And this is like, this is good. Someone just wrote affirmations because I was just about to go there. Affirmations only reinforce the thing we're trying to get away from. So if I'm writing I'm enough 500 times a day, we're only doing that to try to get away from the fact that we're not enough. So what we're doing is we're reinforcing the fact that we're not enough, which only reconfirms it again and again and again. And that just reinforces the position of lack that got us into that space in the first place, that makes us think we need affirmations to get away from the negation, which is driving the affirmation, right? It's madness. And so what we look at from that perspective is that's a form of desire. And desire is I have something I don't want, or I want something I don't have. The byproduct of that is frustration. The frustration isn't going to be comfortable, and then we move back into desire to get away from the frustration, which generated the frustration in the first place. And then it's just a cycle that keeps going. And so we have to look at what we truly want underneath it all, which we're in a state of suffering resistance, and then we want to get away from that. So we really want freedom from that. And so the way that I sort of look at it with people is, where do you get angry? What triggers you? That's the work. And so once you actually start to move into someone just commented, but it's like they might work through hard work, but what we want to get away from is the need to desire anything to substitute something that we're not dealing with. What we want is peace. What we want is freedom. That's what we really want. When we're in that space, then we can generate the energy. So there's energy, then there's intention, then there's action, then there's commitment, then there's outcome. So we have to generate the energy first, right? So that can happen from a free place. So we want the energy. Then we want, what intention are we setting to this? Like, is my energy like I need a new car and so I want to go and buy a black Range Rover? And so my action is to work really hard to save up the money to get a deposit, which then is reflected in the commitment, and the outcome is, okay, I have a black Range Rover, but now what? Or would you rather set your energy to like, okay, my energy is one of abundance and love and freedom and peace. My intention is to share this with the world. The action I'm going to take is define how I want that to manifest. And the commitment is I'm going to keep doing it even longer, even after the mood has left me, to keep doing it. And I'm going to stay committed and I'm going to show up where I need to. The outcome of that is going to be living a life probably like you and I both live, which is one of fulfillment and wholeness, where I work pretty much every single day. I usually work myself to the point where I get sick like I am now, take a few days off, and then I get back to it. My partner was even asking me this morning, she goes, what do you need? And I said, just some fucking time off. That's it. And that's my rest time, is just a time off. And so this is the nature of that. You know, we can look at law of attraction or manifestation or whatever. You're always manifesting based on the frequency that you're emitting. Listen to your thoughts, look at what you're holding on to, start to try to release that, and then energy will be more available to you, like I said earlier, to match up with a frequency that's of a higher quality in the fifth dimension, which will collapse into third dimension particle.
So eloquently put. I'm thinking of the Joseph Campbell quote about the Grail Knights, where it's like, where do they start their quest? It's like each knight must enter the woods, the forest of darkness, at the point that is darkest to them.
Yeah.
So folks listening,
Beautiful.
you know, everything you just broke down there, like you have to go to the front line for you.
Yeah.
Right now.
Always.
Like you don't need to read a bunch of books and figure out, okay, like I'll do this system, and no, just start, like you said, where the energy is. It's physics. There's an energy attractor in your life right now. That's the main point of resistance. And that's how you're going to actually start.
Yeah. And then people will resist the resistance that's already there. And then they'll want to move back into come full circle, is they'll start to blame, right? They'll start to resist. They'll start to say, life's not fair. Like, life is just the way that it is, you know, and you're showing up in a certain way, which is really the way that you want it. If you want to play small, you want to be shamed, you want to feel rejected all the time, whatever it is, that stuff's showing up for you because you fucking love it. You like it. That's it. And the minute you start to own that you like being humiliated, I've delineated in my work 6 basic needs, and I haven't been able to get away from it since I discovered it, because we get, love languages and all that sort of stuff. And I ask people, what are your needs in a relationship? And they're like, love and trust and communication and this. And it's all bullshit until you actually get past the unconscious aspect, which is coming up. So there's 6 needs: rejection, abandonment, humiliation, betrayal, victimization, and deprivation. These are our 6 basic needs as a human being that are in the unconscious. It is pretty savage, and I can be pretty savage in the way that I talk. But all that sort of fluffy stuff is cute and it's fun, but it's fucking bullshit because people use that as a way to get away from the fact that people like to be humiliated. They love to be betrayed. They get so much satisfaction out of being rejected.
And they get a ton of adrenaline. They get adrenaline and like that high from it, basically.
Yeah, and like fear, right? Because if we look at fear, fear is the same chemical as excitement. Excitement is desire, desire is arousal, and arousal is a turn on, right? If you really feel into that when you're scared, there's a sexual element to it, and it hits in the same spot that sexual energy is generated. So when we're afraid of being rejected or abandoned, it's fucking exciting. It's intoxicating because it puts us back into the instability, the unpredictability that we experienced as children that we equated with love. And then we keep going back to it again and again and again and again until we transfigure, transmute, and transcend that into our greatest triumph. And that's pretty much the game.
Mic drop right there. A lot of people just
Yeah.
have their mind blown that what they thought was compatible love and abundance was actually trauma bonding and addiction to, yeah. It's like
Yeah.
a fear kink, basically.
It is, yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that because it's meant
Right.
to be transcended. So we go into like romantic love, which is all the chemicals and the intoxicated aspect, which is all great. But then that starts to move into the chaotic power struggle, the burn down after that. But what we're meant to do is to move through the wounding to release it through the revelation that this person showing up is meant to help me to overcome that. Relationships are not about love, they're about healing. That's what they're for. This is what I teach everyone. It's a relationship with yourself. You don't have a relationship with anyone else. You only see them through your own prism of your own trauma and the difficulty and trapped energy of your own nervous system. Once you release that, then you can move into a real love relationship. I'm in one now, and it's completely freeing. But all the good stuff, all the tension, all the sexual desire is there. It increases, but you just don't have to deal with the bullshit of the triggers of your own wounds. And that's what we're meant to get into. To overcome the karma, overcome the wounding. Your partner will be the perfect mirror for that, showing up exactly the way that you want them to show up because you've manifested them. They're a perfect little holographic projection that you've chosen to show you all your wounds. When you take responsibility for that, you see that the relationship is actually for your healing. It's an opportunity. It's not a problem. You look at it through a different way, and then you move through all the wounds. Then you get to start to experience the real love stage. And once you get there, it just becomes so easy. And the fights aren't exciting anymore. The chaos isn't exciting anymore. But you get all the good tension, but you get the real love with it. And that's you're probably in that yourself, Kevin. I don't want to speak for your relationship, but it's beautiful once you reach that.
Yeah, it's you can learn from pain or you can learn from pleasure. And there's a beauty to like overcoming that, but it has to be earned, obviously, as you were describing. There has to be a transcension of those trauma bonds and those like icky kind of, attachments that we set up. And I mean, this live, brother, has been fucking incredible. I'm definitely going to be posting this for those freaking out in the comments. Where can people, I mean, obviously people can find you here at Pure Jaguar, but if someone wants to reach out to you, learn more, work with you, what do you got going on?
Yeah, I've got a group container, which I just started my first one ever this weekend gone. So that's a 6-week one. We've already had like really powerful shifts and releases in that. I'm doing live one-on-one coaching with people in the group, and I'm teaching my coaching methodology on how to actually do it so people can use it for themselves. So it's super powerful, and it's much cheaper than, because I am pretty expensive. It's much cheaper to get access to that. And so I'm starting a second container due to the popularity of it and the response in October. Details of that can be on my website at jaguarheart.co, or people can DM me and get involved in that, and all the info's there.
Sweet. Definitely go check out his stuff. I mean, you can if you just implemented 10% of what happened in this live, like your life will change. But it also helps to have accountability and that group to go with you, and the mentorship. I know that's been pivotal in my life and work, and I know you know that. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
brother, I want to thank you. It was so amazing to meet you in this way. And yeah, after this, you are definitely even better as a speaker than as a writer. So thank you so much.
Man, I appreciate you. I appreciate all the work you're doing. I love the message you're doing. So good to connect. I've seen you for a while, and I love the work you're doing. You know, it's an honor just to share the space with you as well, man. And thank you so much for the platform. And I look forward to connecting again in the future, man. We'll let's do another one for sure.
Let's do it. This is part one for now. Have an amazing day, brother. Thank you, everyone, for
Awesome,
joining.
brother.
Give
Thanks
this man
very
a
much,
follow.
man. Cheers, brother.
Cheers.
See you later.